Hello and welcome to our FODMAP chat session. My name is Alana Scott and I'm the founder of A Little Bit Yummy. I'm going to be your host today. And on this FODMAP chat session, we are talking to Lyndal Collins. Now, Lyndal is a research dietitian with the Monash University FODMAP team. Now, in case you don't know, Monash University are the lead researchers of the low FODMAP diet, and that means Lyndal is an absolute world of knowledge when it comes to FODMAPs and IBS, as well as today's topic, which happens to be constipation. So, hello, Lyndal. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Alana. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me.
We are super excited. We are really hoping that in today's chat session, you can shed some light on constipation and your go-to tips for managing symptoms. Because, let's face it, no one likes it when you can't go to the loo. It's, bloaty and painful and uncomfortable, and it's really not a fun time. So fingers crossed that today we've got some good tips coming your way and that, we can make someone's life just a little bit easier. Cool.
Fantastic.
And I think I've forgotten something. So just before we jump in, I am going to remind everyone that we know you've got questions as you listen into the video. So what we want you to do with those questions is put them in the comment section below. So we're going to come back after the session and we'll read through your comments, and wherever possible, we'll post helpful links or more information on whatever you need help with. So please feel free to comment and we'll do our best to help you. Okay. Are you ready, Lyndal? Shall we jump into the topic?
Let's go.
Cool. Okay. So just in case someone listening in doesn't understand what constipation is, could you quickly define it for us?
Sure. So the definition can vary a little bit, but generally speaking, constipation is defined as having less than 3 bowel movements a week, and it's associated with symptoms like having bowel movements that are really hard, or stool, poo. Let's call it what it is, poo. Poo being really difficult to pass. So you're really straining to go to the loo, and so that's the one aspect, is the straining and the hard poo that's difficult to pass, and then the frequency being quite low in a week. So some people don't go to the toilet as often as others, but when they do, they don't have any issue passing their bowel movements, and the stools are quite soft and easy to pass. So that's not what we would consider constipation. But if you sort of fit those other two criteria of not very frequently happening, so typically less than 3 times a week, and hard, difficult to pass bowel movements, that's generally what we would consider being constipated clinically.
Awesome. And well, not awesome, horrible, but that's a really clear definition. For those of you who like the Bristol stool chart, which is a really useful tool, we're looking at the stool types that are they look like kind of like if you've grown up on a farm, sheep pellets, or like little separated lumps, or the stool that is sort of sausage shaped but really knobbly or lumpy, right?
Yeah. So generally we're talking on a Bristol stool chart between what's considered type 1 and type 3. Somewhere in there are your sort of more constipated stool types that tend to be hard and difficult to pass.
Yeah. So if that sounds familiar, then constipation is probably something you need to have a conversation about. Okay. So obviously we're doing a show called FODMAP Chat right now. So the next question we see a lot is, can the low FODMAP diet help with constipation, or does it help with some of the associated symptoms that go along with constipation?
Yeah, and look, it's a bit of a complex answer, because for some people it does, for some people it doesn't. So there are different subtypes of IBS if we get into the nitty-gritty of the diagnosis. So some people find that their symptoms are more constipation predominant, so they experience constipation more often than not. Some people diarrhea predominant. Some people have a mixture of both constipation and diarrhea. They might fluctuate between the two, or some might not have those, fit that typical subtype of any predominant bowel symptom in that regard. So when we're talking about constipation predominant IBS, God, I've forgotten what the question was now.
So we're talking about, can the low FODMAP diet help with constipation? Yes. Or does it help more with symptoms like the bloating, gas, distension that people with constipation often also experience as well?
Thank you. Yes. So if we're considering constipation predominant IBS, or people with that predominant symptom, sometimes a low FODMAP diet will improve things, but there are other symptoms that the low FODMAP diet often improves that kind of improve the constipation as a consequence. So things like bloating or extra gas being in and around the bowel can actually affect the movement of the bowel and how quickly or slowly things are passing through. So sometimes if we've reduced the bloating, we've got less of that excess gas passing around the gastrointestinal tract, it's easier for your waste to move through. So therefore, constipation might improve as a sort of side effect of reducing that gas and that bloating. So that's one way in which it can work for people with constipation predominant symptoms.
And that really does make sense. And also, if you're reducing that bloating and gas, then often a reduction in abdominal pain and symptoms from all those nerve endings being stretched will sort of maybe reduce as well. So it sounds like if you have constipation, the low FODMAP diet might be worth trying. But I also know that when you've got constipation, there's also a whole lot of other tips and strategies and things that you can do to improve your bowel movements and how often you're going as well. So, Lyndal, could you talk us through your top constipation management tips? Like, what are your go-tos when you've got a patient with constipation?
Yeah. Look, it's going to be different for every patient, and this is where working with a dietitian is very helpful, because we can take a really thorough history of your symptoms and kind of try and work out what might be the major contributing factors to your constipation. So that might involve looking at your current food intake or food diary that you've kept and seeing whether or not there's enough fiber. So fiber is something that's really important for helping our waste products move through our gut and kind of forms part of your poo or at the end. But it helps to keep your poo soft and easier to pass and retain enough water so that it is nice and easy to get rid of, which is the ultimate goal. So we might look at fiber in your diet as one factor to see whether you're having enough, or some people have too much. It can also be problematic. Less likely.
I was going to say, doesn't like half the population, if not more, get less than half the recommended fiber requirements per day?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, research would tell us that for the vast majority of people, we're way underdoing it with fiber rather than overdoing it. But your dietitian is going to consider both options for you. But it's
because we know most people don't get enough. How many handfuls of fruit and vegetables should we be aiming for in a day?
Yeah. So, I mean, you hear the typical sort of 2 and 5. So 2 serves of fruit, or that this is what it is in Australia anyway. 2 serves of fruit, which is generally 2 pieces of fruit, and 5 serves of vegetables. So a serve of vegetables here is considered sort of half a cup of cooked vegetables or 1 cup of a salad type vegetable. So it's quite a lot. But keep in mind that we also are getting fiber from other food groups too. So our grains and cereal food groups, our sort of meat alternatives as well, if you consume things like legumes or that kind of thing, also contain fiber. So it does come from multiple sources, but the majority of the population are really underdoing it, particularly from the veg. Probably the vegetable category is the one that we kind of fall short on most of the time. Yeah.
So what I'm hearing here, constipation tip number 1, work with a dietitian, look at your fiber intake. And if you've been avoiding those vegetables, now might be a good time to start sneaking them back into your diet and trying to make them fun so you actually eat them.
Yeah. So your dietitian can certainly provide you with strategies and really personalized advice around upping your intake of certain fiber-rich foods to help with your constipation. Without going into too much detail about fiber, there are different types of fiber as well. So dietitians are really knowledgeable in playing around with different types that might be particularly beneficial in your situation to increase or decrease or play around within your diet to help achieve that relief from constipation. And if you are still really struggling getting enough fiber from food, there's lots of different fiber supplements that can also be added in. And there's plenty that are considered low FODMAP. So
where do we find those, Lyndal? Where do we find these magical low FODMAP fiber supplements? Is there a list somewhere?
There is a list in the dietary supplements category in the Monash FODMAP app. So you'll see a whole range of different products in there that have been tested by Monash and certified as low FODMAP. So we can, be assured that they're not going to trigger symptoms from a FODMAP point of view, and they're safe to include if you are following a low FODMAP diet.
Awesome, cool. Okay, so we've just ticked off fiber, but what about other lifestyle habits? So for example, what about toileting posture? Because I've heard rumor that Western style toilets are not your friend if you have constipation.
No, they're not. They're really not. And look, they're not for anyone. So if you've traveled extensively, particularly around Asia and countries like that, you'll notice that they have squat toilets, or toilets that you have to actually physically squat over to pass a bowel movement. And this is quite intentional because our body is actually designed to poo in that position, not in a seated position, as is very typical with a Western style toilet that we all find in our bathrooms. So the way in which the bowel is kind of curved around, I guess, it works a lot better to open and release waste when you're in that squatted position. So on a Western toilet, the way around this, because unless you want to completely
replace a toilet,
really simple solution is to get a footstool. So what we want to do is actually elevate our knees so that they're above our hips when we go to the toilet. So getting your feet up, I'm trying to do this on my Fitball right now. Getting your feet up. Getting your feet up. So that the angle is slightly of your knees is slightly above your hips will really help just almost like unkink your bowel, for lack of a better visualization. You've got a hose,
like a garden hose, right? Which is sort of like kinked a little bit, which is good because you don't want to have like uncontrollable poop all the time. You need your pelvic floor to help you control that. And then when you lift your legs, you go from having this like slight curve that's happening to like more of a straight line.
More of a straight line, just easier exit. So there's a really funny YouTube video for a product called the Squatty Potty. I'm sure you've seen it, Alana.
So there's rainbow unicorn poop featured in that, is there not?
There is rainbow unicorn poo featured in that video. It's quite hilarious, but it gets the message across really clearly around posture and how a footstool can help. And it doesn't need to be an expensive Squatty Potty branded footstool. It can be any footstool that achieves that sort of elevation of your knees above your hips. You can even use toilet rolls. So if you've got spare toilet rolls hanging around, or if you're in a public toilet where you don't have access to a footstool, you can use toilet rolls if they're there. This sounds kind of gross, but I've also heard a pelvic floor physio suggest tipping over a bin or a that kind of thing.
I'm mildly concerned about that recommendation, Lyndal. I've got like massive fears of like all sorts of things that you do not want to have to pick up later, ending up on the floor.
That's true. But if it's really important to you to do that posture, there are, you don't have to use an expensive footstool is what I'm getting at.
Yes.
There are other household items.
Yeah, a cardboard box if you're at home also works really well. And don't forget that your local hardware store or like Target or here in New Zealand, Kmart probably have little foldable, collapsible stools that are not too expensive that you could use. So make sure you go and check out your local stores and see what you can find. Okay, so before you also mentioned a pelvic floor physio. So obviously someone with constipation was seeing that physio to see if they could help. So can you explain more about the role of pelvic floor physios?
Absolutely. So the pelvic floor is sort of the muscles that kind of act as they sort of form like a sling around our digestive organs and our pelvic organs, and also where our anus is or sort of connected to. So they're really important. It's really important to have good you need sort of strength and coordination of these muscles in order to have bowel movements and pass them easily without an issue. So sometimes there can be problems with those pelvic floor muscles, whether they be too tight so we can't release them properly or relax them properly, or we don't have enough strength in them for whatever reason. There's many, many causes to that, but things like childbirth is a really, really key one. Pregnancy and childbirth can have a huge impact on our pelvic floor.
And weightlifting as well, right? Weightlifting or like, in the world of COVID, persistent coughs can weaken
coughs, absolutely. So anything that puts additional pressure through that sort of abdominal pelvic region can weaken or affect the pelvic floor in a way that the muscles just aren't working as they should. So really, really important if you think that the pelvic floor might be contributing to your symptoms, or if you've ever given birth. I think anyone that's ever been pregnant or given birth should see a pelvic floor physio, particularly if they're having these kinds of symptoms, to just get it assessed and see whether or not could be a contributing factor, and see whether those muscles are all working as they should in a coordinated fashion. So they can do various assessments to help you. Sometimes there's a really good treatment for constipation is actually just retraining your pelvic floor muscles to kind of work in a coordinated fashion. So it's a bit of a mind game there. But it can make a huge difference if you're not relaxing or contracting those muscles correctly. It can really contribute to those symptoms of constipation. So getting it checked out by a professional is important.
And if you are looking for a pelvic floor physio, your GP can often tell you one refer you to one that's local. Otherwise, now, I'm sorry, guys, but sometimes they are referred to as women's health physios. If you've got pelvic floor issues and you are a male, then, they can still help you. So, don't let the name put you off. Go get those pelvic floor muscles checked, because we want to help you get to a place where constipation is not ruling your life. Okay, so we've ticked off pelvic floor, we've ticked off toileting posture, we've ticked off fiber, which must be, Lyndal, that we probably need to have a conversation around fluid.
Fluid, yes, a really, really important one. So simple question around constipation is, are you drinking enough, particularly water? So our bowel relies on having enough fluid consumption through it every day to help keep those stools nice and moist and I guess slippery in a sense, so that they can be passed easily, and they're not sort of dried out and hard, because your bowel will reabsorb a lot of the water that you drink or fluids that you drink. But we don't want it to reabsorb so much that the poo at the end of the day is like hard as a rock. So I think we're probably all at some point in our lives been there. We've had one of those bowel movements and they're just not fun, not nice at all. And yeah, fluid plays a really integral role in making sure that balance between your body reabsorbing enough water and keeping you hydrated elsewhere versus keeping your poo nice and hydrated as well, so that it's easy to pass.
Is there a general, there might not be, but is there sort of a fluid goal to aim for, especially if you know you're not good at getting in your fluid intake?
Yeah, look, again, it does vary a lot on things like your age, your gender, how active you are. So if you exercise a lot, you're going to need to drink a lot more because you're losing fluid through sweat. In general, kind of that 8 glasses a day or 2 liters roughly is what's sort of blanket recommendation for most of the population. But like I said, that's going to vary significantly depending on even the weather. You know, if it's a hotter day, again, you've got to think about where fluid's being lost. If you're sweating, if you're a really sweaty person, just in general, you're probably going to need more than that 2 liters. So it's a really simple strategy to start with. If you're feeling really overwhelmed about fiber supplements and all the other stuff, it's a really simple one to start with, is just setting yourself a goal of slowly increasing that fluid intake over a week or 2 and seeing what kind of difference that makes.
And I'm guessing here, but you know, resolving constipation is not an overnight. You can't try a strategy, whether it's increasing fiber, a fiber supplement, changing your fluid intake, doing your pelvic floor exercises, or using, you know, a stool under your feet when you go to the bathroom, and expect a massive change to happen that week. I mean, it takes time to retrain your bowel, right? So
Yep.
I'm guessing you need to be consistent here for maybe at least a month, maybe a bit longer than that, and give your body time to adjust to these routines.
Yes. Another really key thing that you just reminded me of then, Alana, was around going to the toilet when you get the urge to go. So this is something that is often.
I struggle with this. I'm a real private pooer. If I'm at the work office, or if I'm, you know, with a group traveling or something, I'm like, oh no, I'm just nobody. You do not need to poop right now. We'll just hold on to that. And yeah.
I'll dob in my partner here. He's exactly like that, in that he will not poo basically when he's out of the house. So if he's out and about at work, whatever, he just, unless it's absolutely urgent, he won't do it.
He'll diet.
Which is not, yeah. And the reason why we say don't do that is because, again, it's interfering with that signaling between your brain and your gut, that your brain is telling you, I need to go. We need to make some space in here. It might be, often it's just after you've eaten something, that you'll get that sort of urge to open your bowels. And that's not a coincidence. It's because eating stimulates the digestive tract and gets things moving. So we want to make more room in there for that meal you've just eaten. It's going to try and push things along. And if there's something right at the end that needs to come out, you're going to get that urge or that signal from your brain to go, oh, we need to go to the toilet.
It's time.
So the key thing, it's time. The key thing there is don't ignore that signal, because the more we ignore it, it actually weakens the connection.
It fades into the background.
Fades away. So eventually you get really good at holding on to your poo, because you're just not receiving that signal very strongly anymore until it's an absolute, like, has to come out, because there's literally no room left in there.
And you get stuck in this constipation loop because you've held on to that poop for so long. It's now dried out And now it's really difficult to pass, and it takes a whole lot more effort, and you need really good pelvic floor and all that sort of stuff to get it moving again. So,
and that's another really good point. The longer your waist, I guess, sits in your bowel, the more water is reabsorbed from it. So, like you said there, Alana, it's going to get harder and harder and harder the longer that you ignore that signal to go. The more water is being taken out, the harder your poo is getting, which makes it harder to poo, to pass it. So it can become this kind of perpetual cycle of where, again, you might need to work with a pelvic floor physio to actually retrain that connection so that you can tune into the signals again of when you need to go and honor your body.
I love that phrase. It is such a good phrase. So honor your body. Now, Lyndal, before we wrap up this constipation session, which has been super fascinating, are there any other tips that you want to pass on to people with constipation?
I think the only thing, just to reiterate, as you said, Alana, that constipation can be a multifaceted sort of cause behind it. So don't be disheartened if you try one strategy and it doesn't work. You may need to try multiple things all at once, all in combination to kind of get everything working again. And it might take that time. So it is a bit of a, sort of need to be committed in a sense to work. It's a long game. Yep. And all of these changes, that you make to your diet and your fiber intake, your fluid, your posture, all of those things are really positive for other aspects of your health as well. So it's not, they're not going wasted, even if you don't get complete relief from all of these strategies. They're actually beneficial for other aspects of your health too. So they're not wasted. You're still going to make some progress, regardless of whether or not they give you the exact outcome that you're after, but just keep chipping away at it.
That's really good to know. We want you to go forward and create your own constipation toolkit with all of these different strategies and make sure you seek help from your pelvic floor specialist, your GP, or your specialist dietitian as well, because there are some other strategies that we haven't covered today that they'll be able to talk you through as well. So I'm going to close up this FODMAP chat session now. We really hope that you found this useful. If you need, in particular, more low FODMAP resources, I know a littlebit.yummy.com has a specific constipation article, and I'm sure Monash FODMAP has one. In fact, I know there's a fantastic article on how kiwi fruit can help constipation on the monashfodmap.com website, which we haven't even covered today. So make sure you go and check that out. So if you need more resources, head to monashfodmap.com or a littlebit.yummy.com and search constipation, and you'll find some more tips to help. So, Lyndal, thank you for educating us today. I feel like you shared a lot of really useful strategies, and we really appreciate you coming on board and taking time out of your really busy workday to help us. So thank you for that.
Thank you for having me. And I hope some of those strategies will give you a bit of encouragement to give them a go. Some are quite simple and straightforward to implement today, start from today.
Yeah, we love that. Okay. So just remember, if you've left us a comment, we're going to answer that after the session. We'll come back and look at your comments and see if we can provide you more support there. In the meantime, I hope you've enjoyed our FODMAP chat, and we look forward to seeing you at the next session sometime soon. Okay, everyone, have a fantastic day, and keep working on those constipation techniques. Bye.